how, because you started, not start, but like you a metal artist first and foremost, kind of. And so how did you start transitioning into writing, or I guess part of your career, because you had Bury Your Gaze. Was that this year? Was that earlier this year?
It was in March.
Time is fake. And
I
now
know.
you have the novella out. So like how did that transition into like writing come to be and start for you?
Um, I've always had a lot of different hyperfixations, and I feel like I've always been really envious of people who can hone in their interests into one like laser beam mastery of something.
Yeah, what the fuck
Um,
is that? How do you do
I don't know. It's so fascinating to me because I'll usually find like a new creative venture or something that interests me, and then I'll go hard into it as much as I possibly can um, for a couple of years, and then I've been prone to sort of like find something new. But writing is something that I've been consistent with since I was like maybe 12. I'm 34 now.
Yeah.
Um, but I sort of like career-wise wove in and out a lot of other things before that. Like I was a concert photographer, I was a dominatrix for 5 years. Um,
Oh,
what else?
cute.
I was a graphic designer, like I studied graphic design in college.
Oh, cool. So, because you design a
Yeah.
lot of your own cover, you designed the cover for Bury Your Gaze, right? Too.
Yeah, which was fun because I got to like resuscitate that,
That's
skill
awesome.
for actual use. That's like beyond my own making little trinkets for myself.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And
Yeah.
so your novella, Coup de Grace, I'm so sorry, my
Mhm.
French is shit.
Oh no, you're good.
It's anomalous architecture. I know that you and I have bonded over our love of anomalous architecture. And so, but I wanted to hear, and whoever's watching to hear, like how you got interested in, like, was there a piece of media that got you kind of inspired to look at this, or like how did that come to be for you?
It's funny because I think after we did the Scarred for Life podcast together, this was like back in 2022. I don't know if you remember this, but I had sent you this like master doc of
Oh
all
yeah, I still
this
reference
like
that document. Don't you worry. I still have that saved. Yes.
because I was like going through this list of all media that I could remember that was possibly adjacent to anomalous architecture, which like I would define as architecture misbehaving, like
Yeah.
doing things that it's not supposed to do. So like multiplying or being really grand or having spaces within spaces that shouldn't exist, like an ocean inside of a basement or something.
Yeah.
And when I like try to think back on where I had like picked up an interest in that when I was younger, so much of what I was thinking of came back to video games when I was growing up. Um,
Yeah.
like a lot
Oh.
of N64 Legend of Zelda games, like Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask.
Oh, like all the
I
dungeons and stuff that you were going
all
through?
the dungeons, I loved the idea of like in Ocarina of Time going under the well and being like in this
Yeah.
vertical space that where you lost a sense of reference to where you were. You were like in these cisterns almost, where space could be as big or as small without you really fully understanding it. Um, and so that's like a really big point of
Cool.
reference. And then of course for like written anomalous architecture, House of Leaves, Mark Z. Danielewski, the king himself, the legend, the man, the myth.
Oh yes.
Um, he sort of like pioneered incoherent, huge, irrational spaces that have a mind of their own, which I think is
Like and in
so
the book too. Like
fascinating.
literally the book itself is kind of like a weird growing mass in its own fascinating way. And you play with form a little bit with this, which I love. It's like because the no like your novella kind of, it's got the usual structure, but then it really starts playing with, I don't want to spoil too much, but I love how you start fucking with structure and like interaction with the text, and it becomes a more breaking of the fourth wall thing. Again, I don't want to spoil, but I was curious, like in your head, in going from writing about anomalous architecture to almost making your book a piece of anomalous architecture. Like, was that always your goal in writing this, or did that kind of come as you were organically as you were writing in the writing process?
I think it sort of came naturally as a result of the process. I've always
Oh
really
yeah.
enjoyed metafiction. Anything that's sort of like fourth wall breaking or really goes into either like a ramble or somehow the text itself, the way that it's formatted, is a reflection of the story. Um, and then again, this I'm just like connecting all these threads now, but maybe that does come back to a lot of like growing up in video game culture again, where choice is like imposed upon
Yeah.
whoever's playing the game. Um, and I love the idea of integrating that sort of thing into a novel. I feel like everything everything that I've written like prior to and after Coup de Grace, I try to do that as much as possible. Where it's like, how can the experience of reading a text be as immersive as possible? Um,
But then
I
you
don't
break that
know.
immersion too a little bit, which is also really cool. I like that tension between immersion, but also breaking the immersion in the same breath. Like it sounds paradoxical, but it's really cool when that can happen with a piece of text. Like when you're looking, you're not even like watching a movie, you're reading it. And it's cool to have that kind of mental bridge you have to create.
Yeah, I also feel like so much of liminal space aesthetic is so visual nowadays, where you're like, you can see a
Yeah.
still image of something and then get a sense of nostalgia or get a sense of like wrongness from it. But then I
Yeah.
wasn't seeing a lot of that in written texts. And I was wondering, I guess, like as a challenge to myself, I was like, how can I deliver on that promise of it was really just something that I wanted to write for myself.
Well, that's the
Because,
best kind of book. You know what I mean? Like I
right?
wrote it for myself and other people liked it. So it's like an added bonus of like I wrote the book I wanted to see in the world. And now
Yeah,
people also like the book that I wanted to see in the world.
it's such a good feeling. I'm like, oh, people like this. And I'm like, does that mean I have taste? I don't know.
Moi?
Me?
But I
Little me.
love Little Meat, but so this is based on like the Montreal subway system, which is incredibly brutalist. I've only used it a couple times, but it is very like brutalist in the way it is designed. So did you spend a lot of time like going? I mean, you are you from Montreal
Yeah, so I'm
or
from
the area? So like
Montreal.
you're
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in Ontario, but I moved back to Montreal when I was maybe 13. And
okay. So you're familiar with the subways. Like it's like a big part of your
yeah,
existence. Then it's not like you had to do a ton of research. It was kind of maybe more ingrained in your psyche.
yeah, I think, I don't know, it's such an interesting part of the city. I'm looking out because there's like a really brutalist structure across like I'm looking at the St. Lawrence River and across from it is Habitat
Oh,
67, which is this
oh,
like
cool.
really brutalist concrete structure that's just a bunch of cubes stacked in
Yes,
different ways.
yes. Okay, I was like, is that
Um,
the one that looks scary and like it'd be in a Cronenberg movie?
yeah, it looks like some weird J.G. Ballard like dystopian building, and it was built around the same time as a lot of Montreal subway stations, which was like inaugurated in 1966 for Expo 67, which was this like huge global draw to the city. And
Oh,
so much of the stations were built during that period. So they were all constructed with like pure concrete because it was supposed to be this raw sense of building something for the people because concrete was like a material that was for the people because it was like
oh,
so abundant.
wild.
So they had built these insane stations, and each of them was designed by a different architect. And so, some of them are more interesting than others, but there's some that just feel like underground cathedrals. Like you're looking up at a space
Yeah.
and you're like, I feel like I'm in like a scene in a movie. It just feels enormous in like a labyrinthian scope, which I really love because it gets your mind thinking. I don't know. I think
Yeah.
you like add a labyrinth to anything and it makes it more interesting.
True, but like I remember walking down before I even like knew about your book, walking into the Montreal subway system and being like, "What the fuck? Like this is very different than any other like public transit station." And it's very grand in a very kind of dark way. It's exactly like how you capture it in the book. So,
Thank you.
but then with Vicken, we are in Vicken's mind the whole
Mhm.
time. What was that like for you to write Vicken and like be in Vicken's mindset? Because Vicken's having a real hard time, to just put it
Yes.
incredibly lightly. And it's got to be a hard headspace to be in. So I was curious for you what it was like to just occupy that headspace for as long as it took to write this and being almost one with Vicken.
Yeah. A lot of the narrative comes from like a very personal space of having
Okay.
gone through
Yeah.
depressive episodes like repeatedly. But then as I got older, I was like, okay, I'm able to sort of when I go into them, I'm able to come back out of them. Like it could be over a matter
Yeah.
of months or a matter of years. but eventually I found myself sort of like re-emerging out of
Yeah.
those spaces. Um, and so I was just sort of like pulling these threads out of my memory.
Damn.
Um, so it came from like a very lived experience, where I was
Okay.
just like, I'm just going to superimpose this onto a space. Um, I love that horror, you can basically superimpose an allegory onto anything. And so I was like, what if a physical space was a manifestation of the liminality of being depressed, where it's like a transitional state where you will come out of it, but it feels like it's immense and it feels like there's no way out. What is it like to be in that state?
I was obsessed with that because I was like, this is describing feelings I've had when I'm in a depressive episode. Like it's like you talk about concrete and how like, concrete's such an important image in this, and it's I'm reading it and I'm like, oh no, this is becoming a very scary look at depression and these never-ending halls of that. And it's such, it kind of sneaks up on you a little bit while you're reading it because you're like, oh yeah, and then you're like, oh my God, this feels so real. So I was curious if that was like, a personal place for you and being able to really access, pun intended, these tunnel, not pun, but like these tunnels inside of
Yeah.
your head. Like that's got to be
Yeah.
both difficult as shit and also cathartic in a way.
It's super cathartic because I think like beyond writing, I used to be really into photography when I was younger. So I would take
Yeah.
these self-portraits where it was just like an externalization of whatever was happening in my life at the time. I felt like it was a way to express myself. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, I've just sort of again transferred my hyperfixation onto writing, where I was like, I'm gonna beam all of my traumas and like obsessions onto a little character and then like puppeteer him
Hell
through agony.
yeah.
Uh,
Woo.
yeah, I'm like, sorry to this man, but he's gonna have a hard time.
I'm sorry to this man.
Yeah.
Um, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Felix. I love how you integrate Felix as a character. Is Felix your partner's name?
No, my partner's name is Len. I liked Felix though. It
Felix,
felt
I'm so
like, I don't know.
sorry. But I love that name. I
It's
love
okay.
Felix and like Felix has such a brief appearance, but is such an important anchor for the rest of the novella. And I just wanted to hear about why you wanted to incorporate a Felix and why this anchor was so important versus having Vic and not have. Like, I love how you have sexual desire come in very briefly, this queer desire, and that kind of follows throughout. It could have easily not been there, but it would have been a different book. So I was curious, like, why were you compelled to make sure that this was such a crucial part of the narrative?
Yeah. I had a lot of like thoughts on that, especially when I was going through the editorial process with my editor at Titan, where we were looking at um, do we make that introductory scene longer um, to make it feel more earned when he's thinking about that later in the novel, or do we keep it brief? But then I sort of concluded that it's not Felix as a person that's driving Vicken to sort of want to recover and have a sense of hope. It's just like having almost like an object or a symbol of someone to hold on to
Yeah.
that gets you out, where it's like if you can project possibility and hope onto something, then you have like a concrete thing to grab onto. So I was like, I feel like you could get away with the scene at the start being sort of brief and
Oh
loose,
yeah. Yeah,
um,
yeah.
because then
I
it's
love
more of an
cruising on the
allegory.
Montreal and like Montreal cruising on the subway. Like I love that too. Again, like I've there's more cruising is being mentioned like in queer movies and books, and I'm like, yay, we're normal. Like we're talking about like queer sex in a way that isn't as like I'm scared. It's just like it's more normalizing, and I just like that.
Yeah, it was funny because I was looking at I had to like time their stops because there's a certain amount of stops that they have like a conversation
I was
together on the
curious, like
subway.
how you. I was looking. The timing
Yeah,
is
I
so
was like,
good.
how long is it between like this station and this station so that they can have a conversation? And then I was like, they need to have somewhere to pluck at the start of the book. And I was like, okay, if they exit at Berry-UQAM, is there a public bathroom somewhere? And it is like quite recent that there is, and it has like a 15-minute timer,
Oh,
which I
that's
think is just
real. That's
terrifying. But
real.
yeah, um, I think that that's fascinating. I've like walked by it. I've never gone inside. But yeah, it's like this frosted glass like cubicle that just like locked for 15 minutes, and then it's like if you're shitting longer than 15 minutes, that's too bad. Someone's coming in. Um,
That's
but yeah,
incredible. Okay. So you really did like, you're like, all right, let me go to the actual stops. That's so cool.
Yeah, and there was like I don't want to like spoil too much at the end of the novel, but he intends at the start of the novel um, to like disembark at the last station and then walk to the St. Lawrence River and drown himself. And so last summer, I had gone with my partner. We rode all the way to the end of the station and then like reproduced that walk and had like a really beautiful picnic um, by the St. Lawrence River where there's this like little park, which is interesting because I had written it not knowing what that park looked like. And then I was like, oh, it's more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. So I was like, okay, we're good, you know?
Love that. Love research. What a sweet piece of way to research? Question
I
mark.
know. I was like,
Um, and then I know I sent questions over, but I'm gonna add a couple more in here. And I just want to talk about Pashmina
okay.
as a character because I love like this isn't just about Vic and being alone. There's kind of these again, like like when we were depressed, those like kind of orbiting people that are around us. And and you have this character Pashmina that's incorporated, and I wanted to hear about bringing her into the narrative and kind of the the thought process around her character and incorporating her at least in especially in the
Yeah.
beginning of Vicken's journey.
Yeah. So this book started off as like a very different project, where I had almost
Oh,
drafted a completely full novella that was about an expedition team of people who get on the subway after at the end of the it's like at the end of the line where buses or subways are supposed to sort of dock at the end of the evening.
uh-huh.
One day out of nowhere, the tunnel continues, and so they have to send an expedition team in. And so Pashmina was originally part of this expedition team, and I had formulated it where it was everyone who was on the expedition team was going through some sort of liminal transition in their life. So either dealing with a sort of illness, which is what I ended up keeping with Pashmina, or someone who had come from a place of war, or someone who was going through like emerging out of coming of age, of being a teenager, and of transitioning. And so she was the one that I sort of kept because I wanted to explore more about um, health and physical health as a manifestation of liminality and like contrast that against the mental health of depression being a sort of transitional state that we come in and out of. So it was just a way to sort of pit those ideas against each other, but it came out of this like
Oh,
larger liminal space idea where I was like, how can I make this real instead of visual?
that's so cool. Well, then also it shows like how different people to me was like experience depression and like that manifestation and like what that means to have to be depressed for different reasons or have different things. And I loved that you kind of showed everyone's experience with this is unique. And I think that's so important with like I feel like depression, and I'm curious if you feel this way, is so kind of generalized in a lot of literature and media. So to see this like kind of complicated, nuanced interaction with mental health, I think is so important to be like, no, mental health is like a fucking nightmare for everybody, but in very different, specific, hellish ways. And I think this book really exemplifies that for me,
Thank
at
you.
least, my depressed
Yeah,
ass.
my breast has to. I'm glad that you caught like got that sense after reading it. It's really sort of nice to peek at. I know authors aren't supposed to peek at like Goodreads reviews and things like that, but it's been nice to see
You are who
people
you are, you
feel
know, you
as
wouldn't
though
know.
I know I'm like, oh, so bad. But it's been nice to see that people feel as though it's a realistic representation of what feeling suicidal and feeling depressed
Yeah,
is, because it sometimes feels like it's such a pigeonholed um like archetype of the type of person who's depressed to the point of wanting to take their own life, where it's like, oh, they must have everything going wrong in their life and they must it must have been like a short and quick decision, where a lot of the times for people it's like this long
agonizing.
agonizing drawing it out, going through the pros and cons and trying to make this decision. And there's the two different ways that people approach it, where it's like Pashmina is almost explosive, where she wants to take control of her like autonomy,
Yeah.
and when she feels like she's losing it, and then Vicken, who has like a longer sort of process of going back and forth and not really knowing whether or not that choice is his own, even, right?
Yeah. Well, and especially because like you get moments of hope when you feel that way, and people don't usually like show that fluctuation of like, do I want to die? No, I don't want, like that really weird mental state that like is so hard to explain is captured so well, which like felt very validating and sort of like even if you're depressed, you're not always like everything is terrible. You're kind of just like in this weird like liminal state, and you're like, I don't have a. I especially love when you're like, I didn't have a bad childhood. Like nothing bad really
Yeah.
happened. It's just a sad sack. And sometimes that's just kind of unfortunately the state of mental health. So I like, yeah, it's validating to read a novel like that and having you tackle depression in such a way. And unfortunately, your experience probably really informed that. You know what I mean? Like, yay, and also I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
So what's
Yeah.
next? Do you want to keep writing? Do you have another project? Any other projects that are coming up that you know
I
tease?
have projects that I'm working on right now. I loved editing Bury Your Gaze. I would love to edit another anthology. Right now, I'm sort of like, I have my fingers in so many little, I guess not little, bigger projects like novels. And I feel like it's such an experience to really have to sit down for projects for that long. Um, so nothing that I can announce yet, but I
Okay,
am
cool.
working on some other things that are, and all this architecture adjacent because I love to have sneak
A
that
little
in
bit of
wherever it can.
weirdness. Hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Well, thank you so much for chatting. Coup, Coup de Grace, pardon my French once again.
Perfect.
When is it out? Tell us everywhere where we can get it and when it will be out for people to read.
It is out October 1st. I have a copy here. It comes out in hardcover. Beautiful hardcover. I finally got to see this for the first time recently. I'm like, it has custom end pages. So October 1st, wherever books are sold, you can ask your indie bookstore, you can ask your library. It comes out on Kindle as well if people prefer an e-reader. And then next year is the paperback edition. So I'm excited to see.
Oh my God, yay, cool.